one time when I was with Chris Rush.
Oh,
I was opening for Rush
dude.
up in the
So
mountains.
amazing.
Yeah, I've known a couple of. I'm very fortunate to have been as close to Chris as I was.
Well, I mean, you guys were close.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just met him once or twice, and just I don't know. He just had that completely different angle.
Yeah.
You know, the rest of us were like over here, and then Chris was, you know, like the Goldfish is a perfect example. And I do that bit for myself. I do that bit for myself.
Yeah.
Because they have such a short life. You do that. You do it better at service than I do.
I'm not going to do a Rush bit.
Well, you know, just the idea of it is that they have such a short memory span that he goes, "Holy shit, a castle! Holy shit, a castle!" I don't know why I love it so much, but it's just And then he would keep calling back to it.
Yeah, he was obviously a literal genius. He was a research microbiologist before he became a comic.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he literally
just
was
a comedic genius. I mean,
he literally was a genius and had this gift of humor. And when he applied that brain to humor,
right?
Holy shit, man!
Somebody once said to me, "Why is he more famous?" And I said, "He doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't. If he cared, if he gave a shit, maybe he would be. You know what I mean?" But
people forget how big he was in the 70s.
Yeah. Oh no. I mean, in the comedy community, he's known. But I think just whatever they call Q rating or whatever the hell it is. I don't.
Yeah. We would run into fans of his everywhere, like in the middle of nowhere.
Sure.
He'd walk in a gas station to get, some gum, and he'd be in there like 15 minutes. So I get out of the car to go see if he's all right. And he's talking to this guy, and the guy will look at me and go, "You know who this is?" Like, because the guy had his albums.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know who he is.
And he was so recognizable because there still aren't that many bald comedians.
Right. Yeah.
Bald and yellow glasses,
Yeah, it's weird how when people recognize you. 100 years ago, I was walking out of Fast Eddie's with Joe O'Brien, and we were across the street, and we were just walking, and I go, "Man, I just can't do comedy anymore. I don't know where it's going. I just feel like I'm just not breaking through." And this girl walks out, and she goes, "Are you a comedian? Oh my God, you're so funny. I just saw you." And he's like,
and you were right back in show business.
And I was like, "I'm back, baby. I'm back." Yeah. I mean, where we started on Long Island in the 90s there, we caught the wave. Not enough, but
the end of the wave. Yeah.
As stand-up just exploded,
Yeah.
And then where we grew up was like, I don't know, there must have been something in the fucking water. I mean, look at all the comics that come from Long Island.
Yeah. Well,
back with Lenny Bruce and Robert Klein and even before that.
Yeah, Rodney. Yeah.
Oh, dude, there's such a long list. It's like insane.
I think because there must have been, so many the most famous comics, I guess, in show business from way before the beginning of the last century were from the Lower East Side, basically. They were poor Jewish kids.
Well, see, I read about this. Those people's kids moved to Long Island.
Yeah. With another generation of it. Yeah.
But they still have the sarcasm and the memory, the trauma was still there. But then now they lived in the country, as they called Long Island back then.
Yeah.
And everything was safe, and you were bored out of your fucking mind. So I think that's what enabled comedy to flourish there, is that they weren't like, my great grandfather carried a sewing machine up flights of stairs to do piecework.
Right.
In the lower, in the east side there. And they called him the monkey because he would go to the top floors. The higher you went up in the floors, the more money you got. So, most people, you had to carry that singer, the thing. Yeah, I'm talking 1910 here. So he would go, though, to the top floors. So he was the monkey. He's the monkey. Yeah, we both come from. That's why I wore the Brooklyn shirt, because we both, like, my family came from Brighton Beach and Greenpoint, and then they all moved
both
out
my
to
parents.
Who's the biggest? Like, we all coming from New York and living in LA. Like, I would see stars all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
but there were certain people that, you know, you're blown away. You know what I mean? You're like, I
Sure.
can't believe I'm in the same space with this person. You know what I mean? So who's that for you? Like, I have a list of,
In comedy?
well, just ever, or, you know what I mean? Like, you know, all the TV and movies you've done. Like, look, Magnum PI, you worked with Blue Blood. I had so much more respect for him before he started doing reverse mortgages. He actually did a movie in Northport called In and Out with Kevin
Oh,
Kline.
yeah?
And I was working in a restaurant down there at the time. So I got to meet him and Kevin Kline many times while they
Well, that's
filmed
cool.
it. Oh, he was like, they were the nicest people. But who isn't when you're a movie star?
Yeah, right.
So who is that for you, though? Like, who's your celebrity crush, and then you got to meet them or work with them?
Well, Jerry. Has to be Jerry.
Jerry Lewis.
Jerry Lewis. Yeah.
Right, which is like,
Because I grew up, I grew up idolizing Jerry, not just for his comedy or his films, but for the humanitarian work he did for the Muscular Dystrophy Association.
Oh, yeah. And that just fell apart without him for some reason. I thought that would go on and on. You know what I mean? But for some reason, it just... So how old was he when you met him?
I met Jerry when he came to New York to celebrate his 85th birthday at the Friars Club, because through my other... I had, you know, some really great mentors in my life. And Max Alexander was my other brother. Other than Chris Rush, it was Max Alexander. Max was like a son to Jerry. Jerry loved him.
Oh, okay.
And he had always told me, he said, don't worry, you're going to meet Jerry one day. Well, JL. Everybody called him JL. You're going to meet JL one day. I said, okay, if it ever happens, great. And then he texted me one day, lunch tomorrow, Friars, JL, ? Like, do you want to meet him? Like, that was the text.
Nah, you know what? I'm going to sleep in.
So I went, and I went to the lunch. And it was to celebrate it was right after his 85th birthday. He just came to New York. His birthday is April 16th. So it was like the first week in May of that year. And he came and we sat, and Max got to introduce me to him. And it was mind-blowing to be in his presence because...
Oh, dude, when I was a kid, I watched all of his movies.
Yeah. And I called him... I've always referred to people the way I was introduced to them. It's an important point because, like, when I was introduced to Oliver Stone, it was, Joe, this is Mr. Stone. So I called him Mr. Stone for the whole time that I knew him.
Of course, yeah.
I was introduced to Spielberg and Peter Jackson by their first names. This is Stephen, this is Peter. So I called them Stephen and Peter. When I met Jerry, I really didn't know what I was going to call him.
So you called him JL.
And Max said, JL, this is Joe Starr. Joe, this is Jerry. Just like that. And I said, hi, Jerry, because that's how Max introduced me.
Right.
And he shook my hand and he looked right through, like, into me. It was an incredible stare while he's shaking my hand, like he was giving me an X-ray. and then he went, "You can call me JL." Like he looked for something. He looked for something.
Okay.
We sat down, and then for 3 hours, it was the three of us at this big table of 12 people. But the three of us were huddled together, making each other laugh.
Wow.
So, and at one point, I made Jerry laugh, like really laugh. He threw his head back and laughed. And at that moment, I was like a 6-year-old. I couldn't believe I made Jerry Lewis laugh.
You're thinking to yourself, like, can someone get this on camera?
Oh, yeah. It was the greatest. It was the
You can play it over in your mind. You can play it over.
Oh, yeah. It was incredible. That was one of the people where I met him, and I couldn't believe I was meeting him. I couldn't believe it was the same guy, you know.
We get afforded that for some reason, even, you know.
Yeah.
As comics, you know. And then you realize he's just some comic, you know.
Yeah.
And if you treat him that way, then, you know, that's how they'll treat you.
Yeah.
You know.
But he was notorious. He was notorious for being either incredibly sweet or 180 degrees.
I've heard he could be a giant asshole.
Oh, yeah. I found
absolute power corrupts absolutely, though. You know,
I agree. But in the time that I knew him, I knew him the last 5 years of his life. We met a couple of times. We spoke on the phone quite a few times.
Wow. Okay.
Right up until Max passed away. When we lost Maxie.
Yeah, which was like a shocker,
ended that. Right? But what's that?
He just, like, didn't he just die? Like nobody knew he was sick or anything.
Maxie, no, people knew that Maxie was sick.
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah. Maxie had
when I heard he
transplant because he had kidney disease. Then 6 months later, he had a stroke, and he already was a cancer survivor.
Oh, shit.
And then it was 3 years after that cancer came back, and took him away.
Damn.
So, but knowing Jerry at the end, the more I knew him, the more I got to see. Kind of like Alan. I knew Alan King. I knew Alan King really well when I was a young comic, and Alan was like that.
Well, he has a great quote that I still say to people all the time. Is once you hear him laughing, you'll never sell shoes again. I guess he sold shoes.
That's a great line.
But he's right. You know what I mean? Once you hear him laughing.
Yeah. But they were both that hot and cold, and I mean immediately hot and cold. They either liked you immediately or just stay out of their way.
Well, at that age too, you got there's no more time for bullshit. You know what I mean?
That's true.
You either deal with people, you don't. You know,
Yeah.
they can at that age. You can do. I think Seinfeld does a bit about it where you can just go ah. You just make that sound, and you can just walk away from any situation.
It's true.
If you're old enough.
It's true.
Go, and my grandfather used to be, you're